States are basically legitimized versions of gangs. No, this channel has not been hacked by anarchists, nor have you accidentally set your browser to "I'm 14 and this is edgy." This is actually what political scientists believe by and large. Let me explain. We turn to Haiti, site of political apocalypses since, well, longer than any of us have been alive. And with my demographics, that is really saying something. Briefly, Haiti is not an ideal place to live, even aside from the current political instability. The country occupies the western side of Hispaniola, and the Dominican Republic to the east provides a nice basis for comparison. Haiti's GDP per capita is about $3,200. Meanwhile, the Dominican Republic sits at more than $25,000. You can actually see the difference between the two even without the artificial line on the map. It is evident from the deforestation on the left thanks to Haiti's myopic logging industry, whereas there still remains lush forest on the right. The whole thing is reminiscent of the Korean peninsula at night, with nothing visible but Pyongyang, or the Gaza Strip at any hour of the day, and people are not clamoring to move to either of those places. The reasons for this are many, but because I really just want to focus on the gang aspect for this video, I'm going to limit the discussion to the basics that connect back to the topic at hand. Back during the colonial period, Haiti fell under French control, whereas in the east, the Dominican Republic was Spanish. The purpose of these two colonies, just like any other, was to set up extractive regimes. But France took that to a much greater extreme. That led to a revolution in 1791 that took more than 12 years to militarily resolve. You can imagine how many people died. Moreover, the conflict was not politically resolved until 1825, when King Charles X had warships stroll on in and say, "Sure, you can have your independence, but you have to buy out all of the property and the slaves that we owned on the island." Although this would cripple the Haitian economy for more than a century, Haiti still said yes because, well, sometimes life is not fair, and the lines on debts told it that the proposal was better than the alternative, as bad as that was. And as easy as it is for keyboard warriors to say that you should never concede to coercive demands, try telling that to the person staring down warships that are about to destroy absolutely everything in sight. Much like how many of my fellow millennials calculated that crippling student debt is better than no college degree, Haitians reasoned that crippling national debt was better than a Haiti in smoldering ruins. The difference, of course, is one of scale. But partly as a legacy of that debt, Haiti never developed stable political institutions, and a 2-decade-long period of US meddling in the country did not help either. Meanwhile, the Dominican Republic eventually began to democratize in the 1960s, and has sustained a relatively democratic period ever since the 1980s. This is when the two halves of Hispaniola began to economically diverge, much like what the Korean peninsula experienced in the 1970s. That takes us to today, with the current mess that Haiti is in. Now, I understand how ridiculous it sounds for a real country, with a seat at the table in the United Nations, to be in the middle of a gang war for control over the country. And you know what? Fair enough. You are watching this on YouTube, which means you have a strong, stable internet connection, and at an even more basic level, reliable electricity, which means you are probably not in Haiti. Only 47% of Haitians have that latter luxury, and an even smaller 29% have a smartphone. But in the grand scheme of things, it is not as absurd as it seems. Skeptical? Again, fair enough. But what do you think a state is? By modern standards, say circa the 1648 Treaty of Westphalia, it is the sovereign entity with a monopoly on the legitimate use of force within a defined territory. Now, that sovereign entity varies from country to country. You have democracies, which are more responsive to the desires of their citizens. You have autocracies, which, well, are not. And then you have shades of gray in between. But if we turn back the clock by, say, 5 millennia, States like this just did not exist. Agriculture had been around in some locations for thousands of years at this point, but it was still far from widespread. Those that had mastered the art were capable of harvesting calorie content far beyond what hunter-gatherers could manage. But all of those farmers faced a similar problem. They were stationary. That made them easy targets for roving bandits, what we might think of as the prehistoric equivalent of gangs. This served as a large constraint on the development of civilization as we know it. Someone with marginal skill at farming, who could produce just a small amount of calories over the hunter-gatherer alternative, would want to avoid jumping into agriculture after factoring in the expected losses from those roving bandits. Only the super farmers could compensate enough for the thefts, but even still they were losing a significant share of their crops. But then one day, a particularly cunning roving bandit got an idea. It was tiring going from place to rob the stationary farmers. So he approached a group of those farmers with an idea. He was terrible at agriculture, but great at violence. They were terrible at violence, but great at agriculture. Basically, it was peanut butter and chocolate before either of those things existed. So the roving bandit got out his lines on grains and proposed the following. He could take just about all of the farmers' wheat right now if he wanted to, but instead, each of the farmers would give him a small portion of their surplus today, and they would do the same thing tomorrow, and the day after that, and so forth. He would then put down some roots and become a stationary bandit. If any other roving bandits came to the farms to steal the crops, he would fight them off. It was in his interest to do so, of course, because his own livelihood depended on extracting food from his farmers. You will notice that the system looks very similar to modern-day protection rackets. A lieutenant in the racket will, request that you pay a protection fee. Now, yes, that protection fee is from the racket itself. However, as long as you comply, you are unlikely to be the victim of theft from a third party. After all, that individual would be encroaching on the racketeer's territory, and racketeers do not take too kindly to that sort of thing. Back to ancient times, those now stationary bandits formalized their relationships. Fast forward a few thousand years, and those stationary bandits held enough territory that you started getting people who specialized not in fighting itself, but organizing the resources to fight. That is how we got kings, and then many generations later, those people evolved into presidents, prime ministers, and dear leaders. So yes, by modern standards, Haiti's gangs-turned-political actors represent a strange situation. But it is just temporally weird. Politically, it is par for the course. And as much as the international community might want to help, there is no simple solution to the problems that Haiti faces. The country has all of the makings of what political scientists call a conflict trap. Let's see it in action. As a country gets poorer, the opportunity cost for its citizens to take up arms and start a civil war decreases. That makes civil wars more likely. But fun fact, wars destroy tons of infrastructure, and without infrastructure, the country becomes poorer. And as a country gets poorer, civil wars become more likely, hence a vicious cycle, or trap, that a country can fall into. To break the conflict trap, it helps to have third-party observers and interveners come in to prop up an era of peace, while international aid flow kickstarts development and helps alleviate the poverty problem. However, the gods of war appear to have a sense of irony here, with the usual suspects like the United States unwilling to intervene, in part due to the 20th century meddling alluded to earlier. Kenya became the delegated intervention force. Yes, Kenya feels like half a world away, because it sort of is, but this is not particularly abnormal. Richer countries often delegate peacekeeping operations to poorer countries. It's a win-win. The peacekeeping countries receive money, and they get hands-on training for their soldiers. Meanwhile, the sponsors get a little more world stability. This time, however, Kenya's High Court halted the deployment. In an act of desperation, Haitian President Ariel Henry flew there to lobby for Kenya's assistance. By the time he got back, though, gang violence had proliferated, and his plane was unable to land. Henry therefore diverted to Puerto Rico, which is where he has been ever since. And now we find ourselves in a classic catch-22. Kenya won't deploy until there is a new round of elections, and having an election without a peacekeeping force is a tall task. It is not reassuring that Haiti has not held a presidential election since 2016, and the Wikipedia entry for the next election is vaguely titled just Next Haitian General Election, though the current deal on the table would require one by February 2026. In any case, until that gets resolved, Haiti will continue to need a mountain of aid, dispersed in whatever vehicles are so afforded to the mission. In the meantime, its airports will go without international tourists and the dollars that they bring with them. And the conflict trap? Well, it will continue to spiral round and 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 round. That's all for today. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Take care. Let's see what we have here. Political will has to be supported. Will you support will willingly, or well, will you not? Greetings from Poland. That was a tongue twister. I'm glad I got through it. I know it's a bit of a meme for when a person gets a little bit of success in one medium to start a podcast, and I have no desire to actually start a podcast, but if I did, I think political will would be a fantastic name for it. We Bulgarians truly value your work. Cheers to you and that homie featured. However, me personally, I do like lines on maps. Well, fun fact, I actually first learned about lines on maps from a Bulgarian. Cheers to you as well.